always get a lot of people asking me like, John, how do you do color? I don't know how to choose colors. My colors are muddy, or it's like, wow, John, you have such great colors. How do you do that, or something along those lines? And I thought it would be a good time just to make a video about it, show you how I understand color. So I think the most important thing when it comes to color is this concept here. Is how I've simplified it personally. That value is directly correlated to form and composition. Composition we're not going to be talking about right now, but value is pretty important in composition. If anything, I could talk about that in the future, right? So another thing is that color is directly correlated to the environment. This is the most important thing right here in this lesson, right? When thinking about value doesn't necessarily have to have a color correlated to it, but every color has a value correlated to it, right? Just because it's the lightness, darkness of it. I'm looking at the top right here. The lightness value of it, that's the value. Lightness, darkness. And the hue saturation is the color. So how do we think of this, right? How do we tie it together? So if I were to just put in a ball here, so it's pure white, and it's sitting in this blue environment, right? And I were to shade it, kind of like how everyone else would do it, right? So if the light's coming from the top right, of course it'll just be darker. Using our brush here, right? Yeah, it looks okay. I mean, it's whatever. It doesn't look great. Why is this, right? It's because we didn't consider the environment in our decision. So when we are talking about shadow, when things go from their local color, which is the white here. Let's say we were just to shade this like any other way. Let's just put in this. This is most how beginners would do it. They see this, okay, make it darker, and it'll be something like this. I mean, it looks okay. I mean, I guess, but it's not great. Like, it could obviously be improved. And why does it look not too great? This is because we didn't consider the environment in our color choice, right? So this white going into shadow only goes into this gray. I'm only changing the gray. How can we make this better? So as you can see, I purposely put it in a blue background. So what's gonna happen, and I'll show you exactly why in a bit, but what's gonna happen is that it's gonna shift towards blue, it's gonna darken, and it's gonna saturate towards that blue. And see what happens. See, that looks much better. I don't know about you, but that looks much better. Because now we're describing where it is. We're describing what's happening around it. Now it feels unified with the background. Okay, you're probably asking, like, why does that happen? Like, why is it specifically this color? How do I know it's this color specifically? What's happening is that if we start in the middle, which is our local color, right, white, pure white, and the background is blue. So what's going to happen to our shadow value? When things change in value, it changes in color too. So when it darkens, what's affecting the shadow? The only thing that can affect the shadow is a thing that's happening around it, because there's an ambient light everywhere, coming from everywhere, right, of blue, but it's not strong enough to overpower the direct light. So the only thing that's filling up the value, the darker value, is the ambient light. So that's what's happening. So how does that look in here? Why is this relevant? It's because when it goes from white to the darker value, it'll shift towards our environment color. So it'll land somewhere here. And that's exactly what I did, right? So I look at the top right. I get darker in value. It jumps to the blue. And it darkens in value and saturates. See, it started at 0 and it saturates. Because it's darkening in value and shifting towards our environment color. And depending on how potent that environment color is, so how saturated it is, determines how far down it'll come. Really, you could choose whatever. You could shift a little bit, you could shift a lot. It doesn't need to be exact, but generally, the more potent it is, the farther it will be. Now let's say there's something else to in the environment to affect this, right? So let's say we have something green, like a very common green grass. Now the ball looks a little out of place because there's just green and it's like nothing's happening. So how do we make this even better? Right, so this can be reflected light coming from the bottom. That's more green. So if we just, of course, we would just make this lighter, it's not gonna work out. I just make this lighter, that doesn't make any sense. So if we take this, it's actually going to be in the blue because it's not strong enough to affect the direct light. The reflected light, if you already learned this in values, you would know reflected light isn't strong enough to affect the direct light. So what's going to happen is that this shadow color that we have, right? So let's say it's starting somewhere here, I would say. Yeah, somewhere here. So it starts here, and it's a green. So let's say this is more over here, right? So we have this is green. So we're starting at this dark blue. Again, we can't show the value. This is just hue saturation, dark blue. And as things shift in value, again, we have to think about what's affecting that value. What is the light coming from? So it's gonna start shifting over here. It's gonna start moving towards this. Now it lands in the cyan. So go here, look at the top right. I'm shifting towards the green. It's lightening in value a little bit. And look at the saturation. So I'll just increase it a little bit, and that should be it right there. And as you get better, you'll be able to get this sense of color. I think I would saturate a little bit more green. Saturate. Go back here. Now look at that. That looks really nice. See? Once you start getting this down, and as you do doing studies of this on still lifes or anything, it is great. Because you'll have that quick instinctual reaction or identification of what's happening. Right? But let's say I want to push this even further. Now, okay, I could make the screen even more green. I can make it a little bit more saturated. Maybe I'll darken it a little bit just so that the saturation will stay. Have this here. Take this blue. Maybe I'll saturate it a little bit more. Make it higher. Make it even more blue. That looks looking real nice. Yeah, it's just looking really nice now because there's a lot of hue shifts and a lot of different things happening. How to even make it even better, right? Make it even better. So let's say the direct light actually has its own color. Let's say it's a yellow spotlight type thing. So this local color is actually going to be really different, right? We're starting at a white here. But let's say, again, the direct light is more yellow. So that white light is going to shift directly. So it's starting here. Starting here in the middle. The direct light is like an orangish yellow. And it will shift, our white color will shift towards the yellow light. Alright, again, because it's the environment that's affecting it. Color is the environment. So the color would be more like this. It wouldn't be pure white anymore, but it'll be really saturated because that's the only way we're going to get that yellow pigment. Now if we change this, now it's a very subtle yellow, right? Look at that. Look, see, from yellow, from white, I mean, it shifted towards the yellow orange is like we had in mind, and it darkens a little bit. Right, because white isn't things that are white and are illuminated by a different type of direct light is always going to be a little bit darker than pure white. Fully saturated, because it's the only way you'll get pigment. When you're all the way up here in the 90s, they do have to be all the way up here if you do want color in it. But it looks really nice. Now there's even more difference. But let's say we want to kick up the intensity of that light. So really what's going to happen is that we'll shift even more towards red, more towards the color. It'll darken, and actually we're going to look at the halftones. Well, this is becoming less of a white ball, but more of like orangish light ball, but like that. Now that's looking even nicer. Because it's a lot of things. There's a lot of things changing the hue, and a lot of things affecting the variance in what we're looking at. And something I like to do personally when doing colors, you take this transition color. You see how it's a little gray? This usually happens when you have a cool color mixing directly into a warm color, and you take that middle color, right? You take it. I would like to darken just a little bit and saturate it a ton, and that'll be like a transition color, and that looks really nice. This will avoid the gray that's in between. You can keep doing that just for a nice gradient. This will keep your grays from too many grays developing and looking disgusting. So again, the whole thing about this is that, just a quick rundown again. That's a sick highlight there. Yeah, right. So let's say, just for example, we started here at this green, and our direct light or ambient light is somewhere here. Look at this. We would have to go all the way across. It would look really desaturated, right? But that's really how it would shift. So it would look almost white, and whatever value we want it to be, we would change the value. But if you want it to make it better, the reason why I did that saturation thing over there is because I want it to curve around instead, right? Because we want to stay in color to shift instead of going straight to gray, because that looks kind of muddy and disgusting, right? So if we have everything, let's just say we have a bunch of different objects that are a bunch of different colors. As long as everything is shifting towards this color, everything's gonna look harmonious and pretty, right? Of course, you can't just have a bunch of colors everywhere. You can't have too many going on, but it's just gonna overload what we're looking at. But that's the general rule. You want everything. You have to think about the environment that's happening around it, what's affecting the light, and how everything is just going to be shifted towards that, right? So you're probably asking, John, how do you apply this into something more practical? So this is a piece I did a few days ago, right? If we look at the finished product, you can see what I used. So if this is the local value we use, we start at this hue of this orangish reddish, and it's a very light value, very saturated. So I would say, if we were to go here, it would be somewhere here, right? I would say. And I wanted a reddish, more warm shadow. I wanted the warm environment. So what it is, it would land somewhere really close to it. So the shift wouldn't happen all too much. You could literally just leave it the same and it'd be okay. But you always want a little bit of shift. So let's say it would shift a little bit. So if we look up here, right, it would shift a little bit. So I'll go from this. Look at the hue. Look at how small the shift is. And it just darkens the value a little bit and loses saturation. And it just looks really nice overall. Right, again here, look at this. It shifts towards red. It starts a little more orange, so I have to shift a little bit more. See how it's moving towards my environment color. and lowering in value, and it's just losing a little bit of saturation because the color I had was a little bit lowered, more towards white or gray. But if we have more something of a green, look at what happens to the green. Look how much more it needs to shift towards the so if it starts over here, and this is where, look at how much it needs to move compared, and that's exactly what's happening. So here we have this, the local color, shift towards red. It's gonna land somewhere in the yellow, and it darkens. Right? Normally, I think in the real world, it would be a lot less saturated, but I just pushed it more. It would probably land here, but I'll push it more, just so it's a little prettier. And yeah, that's generally the whole thing. You can see how values is actually really important to understand, right? So how do you tie that back to value? Is that everything? So basically what you're adding is you're thinking about why does my value need to be lighter or darker? And then on top of that, to add the color, to think about what is affecting the object to have that value, if that makes sense, right? And of course, if I were to go here, color, darken it, or if I go over this ball, of course, you have to make sure my values are okay. So not am I only thinking about, okay, this has to be a little bit lighter, this has to be a little darker in this area. I'm thinking about what's illuminating that, what's happening around that to give me the color that's happening. And that's generally how I think of color. Hopefully that was helpful. If this was helpful for you, you're welcome. And I never know how to end these off, so thank you.